Thank you for watching this training reviewing the changes to fields and procedures at the Sunflower Multiple Listing Service. Many changes to MLS policy, procedures, and data entry fields have been approved by the Board of Directors. These changes are a result of NAR mandates and local efforts to make the database easier to use and understand. These changes are not an attempt to find people more frequently. What is a multiple listing service? You can see on the screen an outline of all of the bullet points NAR uses to define a multiple listing service. These can be summarized by the MLS is a means to enhance cooperation between agents and to provide accurate and timely data for agents, appraisers, and the public. Two rules that support the MLS's purpose. All listings, including rentals, must include an offer of compensation to at least one type of co-op agent. The MLS has no influence on the amount of cooperative compensation you offer to your co-op agents. The yes/no fields for compensation were removed because they're unnecessary. If you are not offering cooperative compensation to that type of agent, simply put a 0 in that field. You are required to submit accurate listing data and required to correct any known errors. Our policy also states that you're required to keep the proposed closing date field up to date. So if your closings get extended, please extend the date in the proposed closing date field. I want to point out the correction button. At the top of each listing, you can see this correction button. When you click this button, it opens an email where you can enter text information to let me know what's wrong with the listing data. And then when you're done, that email goes to me. Only staff can see these emails, and we always keep reporting agents' names confidential. The Board of Directors has changed the time frame to submit listings and make status updates to 3 calendar days. Federal holidays are not counted in the 3 days. Late reporting is the most frequently issued fine, so we want to be sure that everyone knows you now have 3 calendar days to enter your listings and make status updates. There have been some changes to the residential type and build type options. Condo and townhouse are going to be split into separate choices, as are mobile and manufactured. We're adding modular, and we changed metal to barn dominium. We also changed the wording used to describe berm homes. All of these changes are in the field definition guide. The input fields to describe the finished area of the house have also changed. The ones we used in the past were quite confusing to a lot of people. These should be a lot easier for everyone to enter. The basement total field is the only one that's not about finished area. So we'll want to know the total area of the basement and how much of the basement is finished. Because we now have better data about basement area and finished basement area, we can simplify the options in the features section for foundation and basement. We added fields to indicate the number of conforming and non-conforming bedrooms. A simple description of the minimum requirements to be considered a conforming bedroom is in the field's definition guide. You should note that local code and lenders may have different definitions from what is entered in the guide. But the definition in the field guide will be a great starting place for you to know what to enter in which fields. We're adding A bathroom's level description field, so you can tell us what level of the home the bathrooms are on. This can be a very simple sentence like you see in the example below. We've added optional fields to show utility costs and utility providers. We've changed the utility room field to laundry room and then made the level a required field so everyone knows what floor of the home the laundry room is on. There are definitions of auction types in the field guide. Be sure to check those if you are listing a property up for auction. There are several other small changes. The choices for flood zone are now just yes or unknown. The tax ID field is being renamed to parcel quick reference ID. You're encouraged to use the quick reference ID whenever possible because that ID is shorter and easier to correctly copy from the county website to your listing data. We're adding fields to indicate what type of floor an outbuilding has. We've added fields to indicate the HOA management company and the HOA contact person. Everyone should be happy to hear that the character count on the public remarks is going up to 1,500. You guys will have a lot more room to describe the property to potential buyers. And we've reduced the options for ownership type. Definitions for all of these can be found in the field guide. In the field guide, in the directions definition, you'll see these directions. If you have a land listing with no address, include in the directions field the address of the nearest property. This will help buyers and buyers agents find the property when they're looking to see if they want to buy it. The mapping system in Paragon works really well, but it's not perfect, and for listings with no true physical address, it definitely isn't going to automatically point to the right spot on the map. So when you're entering your listing, enter the address, and then click the Validate Map button. The Validate Map button will pull up the geocode screen that you can see here, and to change the geocoding, the latitude and longitude entered associated with your listing, you can either drag the little red arrow pointer to the right location, or you can enter the correct latitude and longitude in the boxes on the left. If you don't know the latitude and longitude, Google Maps can usually help you find that. And it's important to know that your land listings won't show up on some third-party website search results if their geocode is wrong. Some of these websites use geocoding for address searches and not just the name of the city. The Board of Directors has made some changes to status definitions and added a new status. Under active, they added the clause that if the seller has accepted an offer with a contingency stating that the purchase contract may be immediately canceled in favor of another offer, then the listing may remain in active status. Only these drop dead or kick out clauses can remain in the active status. If you have a contingency with a 24-hour, 48-hour, or whatever right of refusal period, those still need to go in the under contract right of refusal. The board added a temporary withdrawn status. This status is for when there's an active listing agreement, but the property is temporarily off the market because it's unavailable for showings. This is to be used for stuff like if the homeowner gets sick and shouldn't allow people in their home, or if the basement floods and it's going to take some days to get the house repaired and ready for showings again. Agents will be fined if this property is shown while it's in the temporary withdrawn status. Those fines are the same fines as clear cooperation fines. While this isn't technically a clear cooperation violation, the board felt that it was in the spirit of the same principle, that you should not make a property available to some if it's not available to all. With the temporary withdrawn status, there's no need to withdraw a property for a very short period of time and then relist it under a new MLS number. The number of options for sold statuses has been reduced to a lovely 3. Instead of having so many options when you're going to mark a listing sold, you will typically just mark it sold. Other options are sold at auction and sold before process. These are defined here on the screen and defined in the field guide, and we'll talk about sold before process a little bit more. So sold before process is the status used when you have an office exclusive listing or you're reporting a FSBO or a sale that was listed in a different MLS. So you cannot report the listing data until after closing has occurred. However, you must enter the listing within 3 days following closing. This is the same 3 days except federal holidays rule as applies to all other status changes. For FSBO listings, use the contract date as the listing date and the closing date as the expiration date. Because these sales are being reported as a courtesy by the selling agent after the property sold, these listings are not required to include an offer of compensation. For FSBOs and sales from other MLSs, once all the data has been entered and the photos are uploaded, notify the office so staff can change the listing agent to house non-member. There's my email address. Please include the MLS listing number whenever possible, whenever you're sending me an email about a listing. It's good to note that you should check the database to ensure the street and city names are available choices before the listing deadline is approaching. We've extended the partial deadline to 60 days, so now partial listings will stay in your maintenance screen for 60 days following the initial input date. So it's definitely a good idea to start early to make sure the data you need is available in the database, but don't start too early. Other things about sold before process notes here. Reporting FSBOs and sales from other MLSs and office exclusive listings is optional, but you will be fined if you add it outside of the 3-day window. Properties that simply go under contract quickly are not sold before process. If you take a listing this morning and you sign the listing agreement this morning and you start marketing it this morning and you sell it this afternoon and the property goes under contract the same day that you sign the listing agreement, then you haven't violated any policy. And you are allowed to enter a listing directly in the under contract status. So you don't have to worry about it going out as active and then changing it to under contract immediately after it's saved. You can just save the listing directly as under contract. There's no need to add sold before print in the comments. This is not useful and not helpful, and it would be better to use that space to describe the property. And as always, include as much information about the property in the sale as you can. A little note about clear cooperation. So we get a lot of questions from agents, most of whom are trying to do the right thing and afraid that they're going to get into trouble. And occasionally we hear about agents trying to skirt the clear cooperation rule with technicalities. So this slide is for both. So clear cooperation doesn't prevent you from doing what your seller wants unless your seller wants you to advertise a listing without putting it on the MLS. And documentation of your seller's directions is the best way to avoid any issues. Clear cooperation is an NAR rule, not a KREC rule. NAR does not care if you put the property address on your advertising or not. If you're marketing a property, you're marketing the property, whether or not you include the address. NAR requires there to be a listing agreement for a property that is a required submission to the MLS for a clear cooperation violation to occur. However, if you're advertising a listing before you have a listing agreement, that's likely a KREC violation. Something to think about. Fines. So you should have received the schedule of fines for administrative sanctions. This document was mandated by NAR, developed by a task force, and then approved by both boards. You should note that the fines are escalating. Your first fine is going to be less expensive than your second and third fines. NAR also mandated that participants and subscribers can receive no more than 3 administrative sanctions in a calendar year before they are required to attend a hearing in front of the board of directors. You and your broker will both have to attend a hearing to explain to the board why you keep violating policy. The other thing to note is that there are no longer violations with warning. The only exception would be data entry errors. If you get a correction notice that you have a data entry error, you have 2 days to correct the error, excepting federal holidays, before you will get fined. For all other violations of policy, the initial notice is the fine. There will not be a correction period. If you need to appeal a fine, all you have to do is contact the office and tell us you want to appeal. Your appeal will be added to the agenda at the next MLS Board of Directors meeting, where you can attend the meeting in person to state your case or submit your case in writing prior to the meeting. The directors will review and determine if the sanction is upheld, modified, or dismissed. The changes in fields might require you to change how you search for properties. Almost any field can be added to a search with a customize button. So when you open up your search screen, there's that customize button at the top of the screen. When you click on that, it opens this field to allow you to change the search fields on your search screen. So you click on the fields you want to add, click the add button. You can arrange the order that the fields appear on your screen, and then you can save it using one of the save options described on the screen. A few search tips. If you're looking for a house with at least 1.5 bathrooms, you should use the total bathrooms field. This field is an automatically calculated field. You can't input data, but you can use it in a search. And what it does is add the number in the bathrooms field to the number in the half baths field to get a total integer, whole integer. So if you're looking for a house with at least 1.5 bathrooms, you want to search for listings with total bathrooms of at least 2. Auctions do not show up in a residential search. You can use the multi-class search to look for properties in more than one class. And you should be aware of the difference between the must-have and must-have one or more fields when you're searching features. Must-have will only return results that have each item entered in the box. It must have everything. Must have one or more will return results that have at least one of the things you entered in the box. We created a field definition guide to help agents know what data goes where and which choices to select when they're inputting their listing data. There is a lot of useful information in this, and we wanted everyone to have a chance to do it right. Please look at it and use it, and let us know if you have any questions. A few common issues and good reminders. When you go to mark your listing sold, the closing date should not be in the future. You're certainly allowed to close a sale before its projected closing date, but please update the closing date when you mark it sold. If the buyer's agent is not a member of our MLS, you'll have to choose House Non-Member as the buyer's agent when you're putting listings under contract. Duplexes are multifamily listings. Half duplexes are residential listings. If you list a whole duplex in the residential category, there's nothing that can be done except to make you do everything all over again in the multifamily category. Of course, if you're listing a whole duplex and each half of the duplex is available for sale as well as an individual sale, you can have 3 listings, the whole duplex in multifamily, and then each half of the duplex in residential. Of course, when one of those listings goes under contract, you'll have to withdraw the other listings that are affected. All data must be accurate information, and unless it's your listing data, MLS policy sections 10 through 12 outline that you will have permission to share other people's listing data with potential buyers. You should only be sharing data with client-facing data sheets. Those client detail reports are also somewhat customizable, but you should never be sharing all fields detail sheets with buyers. And you should never be sharing somebody else's listing sheet with anybody except potential buyers. You're of course allowed to use MLS data to create CMAs, but you should not be sharing data sheets outside of the way they are authorized to be shared in sections 10.12. So the timeline for these changes. August 1st, the field changes, the data entry timelines, and the new fine structure will go into effect. There will be a grace period for the month of August where warnings will be issued for violations that are a result from policy and procedure changes. Starting September 1st, the grace period will end and no warnings will be issued, except of course if you have a data entry error. We're working with Paragon to make these field changes, and you might see some minor changes before August 1st. And then after August 1st, there will be an adjustment period where the listings that were entered under the old system are going to have to be updated as they are maintained under the new system. I'm confident that these changes are actually going to make everybody's lives easier once we adjust and get through that adjustment period. So hang in there. We really are trying to make the database easier for everyone to use. Other potential changes that might be coming but have not yet been approved by the Board of Directors. The board is considering creating some guidelines for when and how you can enter listings that are under construction. You can pause now if you would like to read this list. And the Board of Directors is considering how to address properties that are withdrawn and then immediately relisted. The consideration from the task force is that any new listing with a days on market greater than 0, staff will review the listing agreement to ensure the listing agreement's dates are in line with MLS policy for mandatory submission deadlines. And with the new temporary withdrawn status, there should not be a reason to pull a listing off the market for a very brief time. As always, you are encouraged to call the office anytime you have a question. We are happy to help you learn, answer your questions. We want everybody to have a chance to do it right. We do not like to send fines to people. So please call, please read my emails, and let us know if there's anything we can do for you. Thank you for attending this recorded training. Have a great day.